A vet saves a leopard cub crying from hunger and exhaustion. But then the leopard did this. What begins as a simple act of compassion soon spirals into something far darker. The tiny cub isn't just lost. It's a clue to a hidden world of danger, greed, and power no one was meant to see. As the vet risks everything to protect it, shadowy forces close in, determined to take the animal back at any cost. Each step closer to the truth brings her face to face with predators far more dangerous than anything in the wild. What secret is this cub hiding, and how far will the fight go when saving one life threatens to expose everything? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The autumn wind whistled through the browning grass as Dr. Claire Holliston pulled her weathered truck into the clinic's parking lot. Another morning in rural Montana. Another day of treating injured wildlife and trying to make a difference in a world that seemed increasingly indifferent. She grabbed her coffee thermos, its warmth a small comfort against the chill air dot inside her modest clinic. Claire hung up her worn jacket and began her morning routine. The walls were lined with medical certificates that had once filled her with pride, now serving as quiet reminders of younger, more optimistic days. A stack of paperwork waited on her desk. Funding requests, permit applications, and the endless bureaucratic maze that seemed designed to prevent rather than promote wildlife conservation. "Morning, Dr. H," called Sarah, her part-time assistant. From the treatment room, "The coyote from yesterday is doing better. Wounds clean, no infection." Claire managed a small smile. At least something's going right. She'd spent 3 hours the previous day treating the coyote, which had been caught in an illegal trap. Another battle she'd have to fight with local authorities who rarely seemed interested in enforcing wildlife protection laws. The morning passed with its usual parade of minor emergencies. A hawk with a broken wing, a deer suffering from mange, endless phone calls about raccoons in garbage cans. Claire handled each case with practiced efficiency, though the spark that had once made her eyes light up with each animal's recovery had dimmed over the year's dot. It was late afternoon when the call came in. Sarah poked her head into the examination room where Claire was finishing up with the hawk. "Dr. Holliston?" "Got a weird one. Mrs. Peterson out by the Blackwater Hunting Preserve says she's been hearing strange crying sounds near her property line. Says it doesn't sound like anything local." Claire sighed, already imagining another feral cat or abandoned dog. It happened too often. People dumping their unwanted pets near the preserve, assuming they'd survive somehow. "Tell her I'll head out there in about 20 minutes. The drive to the preserve took Claire through familiar territory. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks already dusted with early snow. The preserve itself was a source of constant friction, a controlled hunting ground that often seemed anything but controlled. She'd lost count of how many injured animals she'd treated that had wandered outside its boundaries. Mrs. Peterson, a slight woman in her 70s, was waiting by her mailbox. "It's coming from over there." She pointed toward a dense thicket of brush and fallen logs. "Been going on since morning. Never heard anything like it before." Claire grabbed her field kit from the truck and followed the direction of Mrs. Peterson's pointing finger. The brush was thick, requiring careful navigation. The crying sound became clearer as she approached, a sound that made her pause mid-step. It wasn't a dog or a cat. It wasn't any sound she'd ever heard in Montana's wilderness. The crying led her to a hollow beneath a fallen tree. Claire's breath caught in her throat. There, curled up in the shadows, was something impossible. A leopard cub. Its spotted coat was unmistakable, though dirty and matted. The cub's sides heaved with each breath, its small frame showing clear signs of malnutrition. "Oh my God," Claire whispered, her mind racing. Leopards weren't native to North America, let alone Montana. This cub shouldn't be here, couldn't be here. Yet here it was, desperately in need of help. The cub weakly raised its head as best. Claire knelt nearby, letting out another pitiful cry. Years of experience told her this animal was on the brink of collapse. Professional training warred with emotion as she assessed the situation. There would be questions, investigations, paperwork, but none of that mattered right now. What mattered was saving this cub's life. Moving slowly, Claire opened her kit and pulled out a light blanket. The cub didn't resist as she carefully wrapped it, too weak to put up a fight. It felt frighteningly light in her arms, its body trembling with either cold or fear or both. "It's okay, little one," she murmured, cradling the bundle close. "I've got you now." The walk back to her truck seemed to take forever, each step measured to avoid jostling her precious cargo. Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened as Claire emerged from the brush. "Don't ask," Claire said quickly. "I'll handle this. But please, don't mention this to anyone yet." The drive back to the clinic was tense, Claire's mind churning with questions. How did a leopard cub end up in Montana? Where was its mother? Was it escaped or abandoned? The implications were troubling, but they'd have to wait. The cub's labored breathing beside her required immediate attention. Sarah's jaw dropped as Claire carried the bundle into the clinic. "Is that?" "Yes," Claire replied, already moving toward the examination room. "I need warm fluids and the pediatric warming pad. And Sarah?" "Not a word about this to anyone. Not yet." As Claire laid the cub on the examination table, something stirred in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Beyond the professional concern, beyond the practical problems this discovery would create, there was a spark of the old passion that had first drawn her to wildlife medicine. This little creature needed her, and for the first time in too long, she felt absolutely certain about what she had to do. The cub's eyes met hers, frightened but trusting, and Claire made a silent promise. Whatever complications this impossible find might bring, whatever battles lay ahead, she would fight them. She would save this cub. Bureaucracy and regulations be damned. As she began her examination, Claire felt her weariness fall away, replaced by determined focus. This wasn't just another case. This was a chance to remember why she'd chosen this path in the first place. Claire worked through the night, her movements precise despite her exhaustion. The leopard cub lay on the examination table, its small body connected to an foredrip that slowly restored vital fluids. Every few minutes, she checked its temperature, pulse, and breathing, documenting each measurement with careful attention. "Come on, little one," she whispered, gently stroking its spotted fur. The cub's coat was beautiful, even in its disheveled state, each rosette pattern unique like a fingerprint. Under the bright clinic lights, she could see just how young it was, probably no more than 8 weeks old. At 3 o'clock in the morning, Mateo Ruiz burst through the clinic doors, his dark hair windswept from the drive. "I got here as fast as I could," he said, shrugging off his jacket. Sarah called and said something about his words trailed off as he approached the examination table. "Holy cow, that's actually a leopard." "Your powers of observation remain sharp as ever," Claire said dryly, but there was affection in her voice. Mateo had been her assistant for 3 years now, and his unwavering enthusiasm often helped balance her own growing cynicism. But how? Mateo moved closer, examining the cub with wide eyes. "Leopards don't exactly roam the Montana wilderness. This isn't exactly the Serengeti." Claire sighed, running a hand through her disheveled hair. "That's the million-dollar question. Someone brought it here, legally or otherwise. Given its condition, I'd bet on otherwise." Mateo helped her prepare another round of fluids, his movements showing the same careful precision she'd taught him. "The poor thing's half-starved. How long do you think it was out there? Hard to say, days maybe. It's a miracle it survived. At all. Claire checked the cub's gums, relieved to see they were looking less pale. The rehydration is helping, but we've got a long way to go. As they worked, Matteo kept glancing at her face. Finally, he said, "You seem different tonight. More like the old days." Claire paused in her work, considering his words. He was right. There was an energy humming through her that she hadn't felt in years. The constant battles with bureaucracy, the endless compromises, the feeling of fighting a losing battle, they had slowly drained her passion. But this cub, this impossible find, had awakened something she thought was lost. "Maybe I needed this," she admitted quietly. "A reminder of why I started doing this work in the first place." "You're the best wildlife vet in 3 states, Matteo," said firmly. "Everyone knows it, even if they don't always like how stubborn you can be about doing what's right." Right. Claire managed a small smile. "Speaking of doing what's right, we need to keep this quiet, at least until we figure out where this cub came from. No calls to fish and wildlife yet. No reports. Just you, me, and Sarah knowing the full story." Matteo nodded, though she could see the worry in his eyes. "You know, this kind of secret won't keep long in a town this size. People talk." He was right, of course. By noon the next day, the whispers had already started. Claire could feel the curious stares as she made her supply run to the local veterinary warehouse. The owner, Tom, held her gaze a beat too long as he processed her order for specialized formula and additional 4 supplies. The cub was improving, taking small amounts of formula and showing more alertness when the bell above the clinic door chimed. Claire looked up to see a tall man in expensive ranching clothes standing in the reception area. His smile was practiced and pleasant, but something about it made her instincts prickle with warning. "Dr. Holliston," he said, extending his hand. "Silas Carraway. I believe you have something that belongs to me." Claire kept her face neutral as she shook his hand. She'd heard of Carraway, of course. Everyone in the area had. His preserve covered thousands of acres, and his influence extended even further. "Mr. Carraway, what exactly brings you to my clinic? Let's not play games, doctor." His smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Word travels fast in small towns. You found a leopard cub yesterday. It's mine, part of a legally sanctioned breeding program. I've come to collect it." Claire crossed her arms, studying him. "Do you have documentation for this breeding program? Permits? Records of the cub's birth?" "Of course." He reached into his jacket, but instead of paperwork, he pulled out a checkbook. "I understand you've incurred expenses caring for the animal. I'm happy to compensate you generously for your time and discretion." "Mr. Carraway," Claire said carefully, "that cub was severely malnourished and dehydrated when I found it. If it's part of a legitimate breeding program, how did it end up alone in the woods?" A flash of something dangerous crossed his face before the smooth mask returned. "Animals escape, doctor. These things happen. Now, shall we discuss the amount that would make this situation comfortable for everyone?" Claire felt Matteo step closer behind her, a quiet show of support that strengthened her resolve. "I'm afraid I can't release the cub without proper documentation. As a licensed wildlife veterinarian, I have certain obligations. Dr. Holliston." Carraway interrupted, his voice dropping to a silky whisper. "I don't think you understand. I wasn't actually asking." The pretense of charm fell away, revealing something cold and hard beneath. "That cub is my property, and you will return it to me. Now." Claire lifted her chin, meeting his gaze steadily. "No, Mr. Carraway, I don't think you understand. That cub is a living creature, not property. It's also evidence of what I suspect is illegal wildlife trafficking. Until I see legitimate documentation, and am satisfied that returning it to you is in its best interest. It stays here under my care." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Carraway's eyes narrowed, and his hand tightened on his checkbook until his knuckles whitened. "You're making a serious mistake, Doctor. One that could have far-reaching consequences for your practice and your future in this community." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Carraway?" "Merely stating facts." He tucked the checkbook away and straightened his jacket. "I'll give you 24 hours to reconsider your position. I suggest you use that time wisely." With a final cold smile, he turned and left, the bell chiming with artificial cheerfulness behind him. Matteo let out a breath he'd been holding. "That guy is seriously scary." "Yes," Claire agreed, her heart pounding despite her outward calm. Yes, he is." She walked to the treatment room where the cub lay sleeping, its small chest rising and falling steadily. Looking at it, she knew she'd made the right choice, despite the danger Carraway's visit had revealed. "What are we going to do?" Matteo asked, joining her at the cub's side. "What we have to do," Claire replied. "Keep this little one safe and figure out exactly what Carraway's involved in. Something tells me this cub isn't the only animal at risk." The changes came slowly at first, then all at once. Claire noticed the black pickup truck parked across from her clinic, its occupants watching with undisguised interest. When she left for supply runs, it followed at a distance. The message was clear. She was being watched. By the third day, her regular clients began canceling appointments. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been bringing her rescue dogs to Claire for years, called with apologies in her voice. "I heard you're keeping dangerous animals there now," she said hesitantly. "I just can't risk it with my babies." Matteo slammed down the phone after another cancellation, his usually cheerful face tight with worry. "That's the fifth one today. They're all saying the same thing, that we're putting people at risk by keeping wild predators here." Claire looked up from where she was preparing formula for the cub, which was growing stronger each day. "Carraway's people have been busy." "Claire," Matteo said softly, "maybe we should reconsider. He's not going to stop. And now he's threatening our livelihood." "You mean my livelihood," Claire corrected. "You don't have to stay, Matteo. I won't hold it against you. That's not what I meant, and you know it." He ran a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "I'm with you. I'm worried about what comes next." Claire watched the cub lap eagerly at its formula, its golden eyes bright and alert now. "I can't give him back, Matteo. You saw the condition he was in. Whatever Carraway's doing with these animals, it's not legal and it's not right." That evening, after Matteo left, Claire made a call she'd been avoiding. 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up outside the clinic. Thomas Holliston stepped down, still in his deputy's uniform, his face a careful mask of professional detachment. "Claire," he nodded, following her inside. It had been months since they'd really talked, not since their last argument about what Thomas called her Crusader complex. "Thanks for coming," she said, leading him to her office. The familiar awkwardness settled between them, years of disagreements and disappointments filling the space. "You said it was important." Thomas remained standing, his thumbs hooked in his duty belt. "Something about Silas Carraway?" Claire told him everything. Finding the cub, Carraway's visit, the escalating pressure. Thomas listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled. "You need to give him the cat," he said finally. "Did you hear anything I just said?" "I heard you," Thomas sighed, finally sinking into a chair. "But you don't understand what you're dealing with. Carraway, he's connected. His donations built half the county buildings. He hosts fundraisers for the governor, and that makes him above the law." Thomas's jaw tightened. "You know it's not that simple." "Actually, it is." Claire leaned forward. "Tell me honestly, have there been other reports about Carraway? Things that got buried?" Her brother's silence was answer enough. After a long moment, he spoke quietly. 2 years ago, there was a complaint about unusual sounds from his preserve. Animal sounds that shouldn't be there. The investigation got shut down before it started. Last year, one of his former employees tried to file a report about illegal wildlife trading. He withdrew it the next day and left town. And nobody did anything? What could we do? Thomas spread his hands. No evidence, no witnesses willing to talk. Caraway's lawyers bury anything before it can stick. He studied her face. You've always been the idealistic one, sis. But sometimes you have to accept that the world doesn't work the way it should. Like you accepted it? The old hurt crept into her voice. Is that why you stopped backing me up when I reported those poachers on Miller's land? Because it was easier to look the other way. I was trying to protect you. Thomas stood abruptly. You don't build a career by making enemies of powerful people. You don't help anyone if you get yourself run out of town, or worse. They stared at each other, the years of distance between them almost visible in the air. But something shifted. In Thomas's expression as he looked at his sister, a recognition of the determination he'd always admired, even when it frustrated him. This cub, he said finally. You're sure about what you saw? About its condition? Come see for yourself. She led him to the treatment room where the cub was resting. Thomas crouched down, his trained eye taking in details. No legitimate breeding. Program would let an animal get into this state, he admitted. And if it really escaped, Caraway would have proper documentation. So you believe me? Thomas straightened, rubbing his face tiredly. Believing you and being able to help are two different things. Caraway's influence runs deep, Claire. Half. The department golfs with him. The other half owes him favors. Claire felt the weight of what they were up against settle more firmly on her shoulders. Money, power, influence. Caraway had built himself a fortress of protection that no ordinary channels could breach. Claire's hands trembled as she held the scanner over the Leopard Cub's shoulder blade. The small device beeped, confirming what she'd feared, a farm microchip. Its serial number beginning with characters that definitely weren't from any North American registry. This proves it, she said, showing the readout to Matteo. Someone brought this cub into the country illegally. Matteo leaned closer, his normally cheerful face creased with concern. Could be from anywhere. Africa, Asia, and somehow ended up in Montana? Claire shook her head. This close to Caraway's preserve? It's not a coincidence. The cub, now stronger after a week of proper care, batted playfully at Claire's stethoscope. Its recovery had been remarkable. Regular meals and medication had transformed the once skeletal creature into a bundle of energy. But the mystery of its origins had only deepened. I've been doing some digging, Matteo said, lowering his voice. Despite being alone in the clinic. You know how people talk at the feed store, at the diner. Caraway's preserve isn't just for local game. There are rumors about private hunting parties, rich clients flying in from all over. Claire felt sick. Trophy hunters? The kind who pay big money to shoot animals they're not supposed to have access to. Matteo pulled out his phone, showing her satellite images of Caraway's sprawling property. See these structures here, away. From the main compound? They look like holding pens. Big ones. Claire studied the images, her mind racing. We need to get closer. If there are more animals being kept illegally, that's not all, Matteo interrupted. Remember that worker who quit last month? The one who came in with his dog? He was drunk, talking about a female leopard Caraway keeps isolated. Said it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, but it broke his heart how it paced its cage. Claire's heart stopped. The mother, she whispered. She's alive. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. She'd assumed the worst when they found the cub alone, that its mother had been killed. But this This was somehow worse. Somewhere on Caraway's preserve, that mother was caged, separated from her baby, probably waiting to be hunted for sport. We have to do something, Claire said. We can't just. The clinic's door chimed. Claire quickly tucked the scanner away as Thomas stepped in, still in his deputy's uniform. Got your message, he said, glancing between Claire and Matteo. What's so urgent? Claire showed him the microchip readout, explaining their discoveries. With each detail, Thomas's expression grew darker. This is bigger than we thought, he said finally. Caraway is not just some rich rancher playing cowboy. If he's running an illegal exotic animal operation, he trailed off, running a hand through his hair. Claire, this is dangerous territory. These kinds of operations, they involve serious money, serious people. All the more reason to stop it, Claire insisted. Thomas, there are animals suffering. The cub's mother is there, probably others too. How can we ignore that? Because without hard evidence, Caraway's untouchable, Thomas countered. A foreign microchip? Rumors from drunk ex-employees? It won't be enough. His lawyers would bury it. Then help me get evidence, Claire challenged. You're law enforcement. You must have resources, contacts. I can't officially investigate without cause, Thomas interrupted. And Caraway's too smart to give us cause. But he hesitated, then continued more quietly. I might be able to make some calls. Check. Some things quietly. No promises. Claire felt a surge of hope. It was the first time Thomas had offered real help instead of just warnings. Thank you, she said softly. Don't thank me yet, he replied. This is still a long shot. And Claire? Be careful. Caraway's been asking questions about you. The kind of questions that make me nervous. After Thomas left, Claire and Matteo stood in thoughtful silence. The cub had fallen asleep in its enclosure, peaceful and unaware of the growing storm around it. What's our next move? Matteo asked finally. Claire walked to her desk, pulling out a map of the area around Caraway's preserve. We need to document everything. Every strange vehicle, every unusual delivery. And we need to find a way to verify what's in those holding pens. That's his private property, Matteo reminded her. Heavily guarded private property. I know, Claire said. But there's a mother out there who needs our help. And who knows how many other animals are suffering while Caraway plays king of his twisted kingdom. She looked up at Matteo. Are you with me? Matteo's answer was immediate. Always. Someone has to stand up to guys like Caraway. Might as well be us. Claire smiled, grateful for his loyalty. But Thomas's warning echoed in her mind. Caraway wasn't just a wealthy bully. He was the tip of an iceberg, a system of money and power that treated magnificent creatures as commodities to be bought and killed for entertainment. Taking him on meant challenging that entire system. The cub stirred in its sleep, making small sounds that reminded Claire of a house cat's dreams. Somewhere out there, its mother was making similar sounds in a cage, waiting for whatever fate Caraway had planned. Claire's resolve hardened. System or no system, some things were worth fighting for. Claire and Matteo worked methodically in the clinic's backroom, photographing the leopard cub from every angle. The little creature had gained weight, its coat beginning to shine with health, but the evidence of its earlier neglect remained clear in the photos. Hold still, little one, Matteo murmured, gently restraining the cub while Claire carefully parted its fur to reveal the foreign microchip beneath its skin. The camera clicked repeatedly, documenting the tiny device that proved someone had deliberately brought the animal into the country. These photos have to be perfect, Claire said, checking each image on her camera screen. We can't leave any room for doubt. Thomas arrived later that afternoon, his deputy's uniform replaced by civilian clothes. He studied the evidence they'd gathered, his expression grave. The microchip helps, but it's not enough. We need proof of what's happening inside the preserve. Claire spread a map across her desk, pointing to the restricted areas of Caraway's land. My contact says the exotic animals are kept here, in these back sections. No public access. Heavy security. It's suicide to go in there, Thomas protested, his face tight with worry. Caraway's men are armed, Claire. They won't hesitate to shoot trespassers. Then we need to be smart about it, Mateo said, joining them at the desk. I grew up around ranches. I know how to move without being seen. The cub wandered over, rubbing against Claire's legs. She reached down to scratch behind its ears, feeling the strong pulse of life beneath her fingers. This isn't just about one animal anymore. Every day that operation continues, more creatures suffer. Thomas paced the small office, conflict evident in every movement. My badge means something to me, Claire. The law means something. Sometimes the law needs help finding the truth, she replied softly. They spent hours planning, marking potential entry points and security patrol patterns. The tension between the siblings remained, but it was tempered now by shared purpose. As darkness fell, they agreed to begin surveillance the next night. Claire was awakened, just past midnight, by frantic barking from her dogs outside. Smoke filled her lungs as she stumbled from bed. Through her window, she saw orange flames leaping from the clinic's storage building, where the cub slept. "No!" she screamed, running barefoot across the yard. The heat hit her like a wall as she approached the burning structure. Inside, she could hear the cub's terrified cries. Mateo appeared beside her, his face illuminated by the inferno. Without hesitation, they both charged toward the building. The door was hot to the touch, but Claire kicked it open, choking on thick smoke. Flames crawled up the walls, turning the small space into an oven. The cub had retreated to a corner, trapped by falling debris. Claire crawled forward, her eyes burning, lungs screaming for clean air. Behind her, she heard Mateo coughing violently. "Here," she called to the frightened animal. "Come to me, baby." A burning beam crashed down inches from her position. Through the smoke, she saw the cub gather itself and leap toward her voice. She caught it against her chest, feeling its heart hammering with fear. "Got it," she shouted to Mateo. They stumbled back toward the door together, the heat becoming unbearable. Claire's shirt caught fire. Mateo frantically beat out the flames. With his bare hands, they burst into the cool night air, collapsing on the grass several yards from the building. The cub trembled in Claire's arms as they gasped for breath. In the distance, sirens wailed. Thomas arrived with the fire trucks, his face ashen when he saw his sister's scorched clothing and Mateo's burned hands. As firefighters fought to contain the blaze, he knelt beside them. "This is a warning," he sighed grimly. "Next time they won't settle for property damage." Claire held the cub tighter, feeling its gradual relaxation as the danger passed. Her voice was rough from smoke, but determined. "They won't stop us. We're going to finish this." Looking at the destruction around them, all three knew the stakes had risen dramatically. Caraway had shown how far he would go to protect his secrets. The question now was how far they would go to expose them. Smoke hung thick in the Montana night air as Claire stared at the smoldering ruins of her outbuilding. The acrid smell of burned medical supplies and charred equipment filled her nostrils, making her eyes water, or maybe those were real tears. She couldn't tell anymore. Her sanctuary, the place she'd built from nothing, lay in partial ruins before her. The leopard cub huddled against her chest, still trembling from their narrow escape. Just minutes earlier, she and Mateo had crashed through the burning door, choking on smoke to rescue the terrified animal. Her arms and face stung from minor burns, but the crushing weight in her chest came from something deeper than physical pain. Claire, Thomas's voice cut through her daze. Her brother stood beside her, his deputy's uniform smudged with soot from helping battle the flames. You could have died in there. I couldn't leave the cub, she whispered, stroking its head. The little creature pressed closer, seeking comfort though Matteo approached, his face streaked with ash. Most of the medical supplies are gone. The diagnostic equipment, too. His voice cracked. Everything we worked for. Claire closed her eyes, feeling the full impact of Caraway's message. He wasn't just trying to scare her anymore. He was showing exactly how far he would go to maintain his power. The fire was a warning, clear as day. Back off, or next time it wouldn't just be an outbuilding. I'm sorry. Thomas's words made her look up. Her brother's face showed raw emotion she hadn't seen in years. I should have believed you sooner about Caraway. Should have backed you up from the start instead of worrying about my career. He ran a hand through his hair, leaving traces of ash. I've been a coward, Claire, staying distant while you fought these battles alone. Thomas, she started, but he shook his head. No, let me finish. When I saw those flames, saw you run into that building, he swallowed hard. I realized some things matter more than playing it safe. Whatever you need to take Caraway down, I'm in. All the way. Claire felt something shift inside her. A spark of hope cutting through the despair. She looked down at the cub, then back at her brother. You mean that? Every word. Thomas's jaw set with determination. We do this together. Matteo stepped closer, forming a tight circle with them. The fire destroyed a lot, but not everything. He pointed to the cub. We still have our key piece of evidence. Claire's mind began working, pushing past the shock and grief. The tracking chip, she said slowly. Caraway's people put it there to monitor their inventory. The word tasted bitter in her mouth. But what if we could use it to prove where this cub came from? Thomas nodded, catching on. If we can show the chip's registration, prove it's connected to Caraway's preserve. Better than that, Claire said, her voice growing stronger. That chip could be our way in. Every animal in his collection must have one. If we can access the tracking system, we could map his whole operation, Matteo finished. Show exactly where he's keeping the exotic animals. Hope bloomed brighter in Claire's chest, replacing the weight of despair. Caraway had meant to break her spirit with this attack, but instead, he'd given them a weapon to use against him. His own system of control could become his undoing. It's dangerous, Thomas warned, but his tone carried no hesitation. He's already shown he's willing to kill. Claire looked at the ruins of her outbuilding, then at the cub in her arms. Something hardened inside her, not fear, but resolve. We're past playing defense, she said firmly. He brought the fight to us. Now we take it to him. The three of them stood there in the smoke-filled night, united in purpose. The cub stirred against Claire's chest, as if sensing the shift in energy. Somewhere in Caraway's preserve, its mother waited in a cage, along with countless other animals trapped in his private kingdom of cruelty. The tracking chip, meant to be a tool of control, would instead become the key to their liberation. Claire stroked the cub's head, feeling its steady heartbeat against her palm. Time to turn the tables, she said softly. Then, looking at her, Brother and Matteo, let's get to work. Claire wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. We can use this, she said, her voice growing stronger. The tracking chip, it's not just proof of trafficking. It's our way to find all of them. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, conflicted but committed. You're right. If we can trace the signal, we can map his whole operation. He pulled out his phone, bringing up a tracking application he used for police work. I've got access to scanning equipment through the department. We'll need to be careful, but we can do this. The next morning, they gathered in Claire's intact main clinic building. Matteo spread out aerial maps of Caraway's preserve, while Thomas configured his tracking equipment. The leopard cub watched from its temporary enclosure, unusually quiet, as if sensing the gravity of their mission. "The signal's strongest here," Thomas said, pointing to a secluded valley on the preserve's western edge. "Heavy tree cover, no official. Buildings listed. Perfect place to hide something you don't want found." Claire studied the terrain. Those service roads, they must be how they move the animals in and out. Under the cover of early dawn, they approached the preserve's boundaries. Thomas's police credentials got them past the main gate, but they knew that advantage wouldn't last long. They parked in a hidden turnout and continued on foot, following the chip's signal through dense pine forest. The first security patrol passed 50 yards to their left. Claire's heart pounded as they pressed themselves against tree trunks, waiting. Intense silence. Matteo squeezed her shoulder in quiet support. High chain-link fences emerged through the trees, topped with razor wire. They documented everything with their phones. The illegal height, the lack of permits, the suspicious placement far from any registered structures. But it was the sounds that stopped Claire cold. Deep, rumbling growls and the padding of heavy. "Pause. There," Matteo whispered, pointing through his camera's zoom lens. "African lions, at least 3 adults. No way those are legal." They worked their way around the perimeter, cataloging each discovery. Tigers paced in 2 small enclosures. A pair of jaguars lay listlessly in the morning sun. Each image was damning evidence of Caraway's illegal menagerie. Then they heard it, a distinctive leopard's call, painfully familiar after weeks of caring for the cub. Claire's hands shook as she raised her camera. Through the lens, she saw the cub's mother, magnificent despite her captivity, pacing with the fluid grace of her species. "She's alive," Claire breathed, tears threatening again. All this time, the leopard turned, fixing them with golden eyes that seemed to pierce directly through the camera. In that moment, Claire felt the full weight of her responsibility. It wasn't enough to expose Caraway's operation. These animals, all of them, deserved freedom, rehabilitation, proper sanctuaries. "We have to get them out," she said firmly. "Not just expose this, we have to save them." Thomas nodded slowly, his earlier reluctance replaced with grim determination. "You're right, but we'll need more than evidence. We need a plan for the animals, too." Matteo was already making calls to wildlife sanctuaries he trusted, documenting cage sizes and conditions to determine transport needs. They worked methodically, gathering every detail that could help build an airtight case. The mother leopard watched them through the fence, her tail twitching with interest. Claire approached carefully, keeping a safe distance but meeting those intelligent eyes. "I promise," she whispered. "I'm going to bring your baby back to you, and then you'll both be free." They retreated as carefully as they'd come, their phones and cameras heavy with evidence. But Claire felt lighter than she had in weeks. They had a purpose now, not just to save one cub, but to right a fundamental wrong, to restore these magnificent creatures to the dignity they deserved. Back at the clinic, the cub greeted them with eager chirps. Claire knelt beside its enclosure, scratching behind its ears. "We found her, little one," she murmured. "Your mom's waiting for you, and we're going to make this right." Deep, rumbling growls echoed through the trees. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the sound of big cats, multiple ones. Following the perimeter, they discovered a series of connected enclosures, carefully hidden from aerial view by camouflage netting. "There," Claire whispered, pointing to a shape moving in one of the cages. A full-grown female leopard paced restlessly, her movements eerily similar to the cub's. "That's her. That's the mother." Thomas raised his phone to record, but a sharp crack split the air. The device exploded in his hand, pieces scattering across the ground. A bullet had found its mark. "Get down," Thomas shouted, shoving Claire behind a concrete barrier. More shots rang out, splintering tree bark around them. Mateo scrambled for cover behind a supply shed. They knew we were coming, he called out, his voice tight with fear. Through the chaos, Claire caught glimpses of Caraway's men emerging from the tree line, weapons raised. She counted at least 6 of them, moving with practiced precision to cut off their escape routes. Drop your phones and come out slowly. Caraway's voice boomed across the compound. He stepped into view, a hunting rifle cradled in his arms. Did you really think I wouldn't be monitoring that chip signal myself? Claire's stomach turned to ice. Their own clever plan had led them straight into his trap. Thomas drew his service weapon, face grim. Claire, when I say run, you and Mateo head for the ravine. I'll cover you. I'm not leaving you, Claire hissed, gripping his arm. Years of distance between them dissolved in that moment of shared danger. This isn't a debate, sis. Thomas's voice softened. I should have backed you from the start. Let me do this now. Another burst of gunfire forced them lower. Mateo caught Claire's eye and nodded. He was ready. Now, Thomas burst from cover, firing 2 warning shots that sent Caraway's men diving. For protection, Claire and Mateo sprinted toward the tree line, hearts pounding. Behind them, Thomas backed away systematically, keeping the gunmen pinned down. They crashed through undergrowth, branches whipping their faces. Claire clutched her. Phone tight? They still had her footage, their one piece of evidence. Heavy footsteps pursued them through the forest. The ravine appeared suddenly, a 15-foot drop with a shallow creek below. They had no choice. Jump! Claire grabbed Mateo's hand, and they leaped together. The impact drove the breath from their lungs, but the water cushioned their fall. Thomas appeared at the edge above them, still exchanging fire with their pursuers. He took aim one last time, then holstered his weapon and half slid. Half fell down the embankment to join them. Run, he gasped, pulling them both up. The old fire road is half a mile east. We can lose them in the switchbacks. They splashed through the creek bed, then climbed the opposite bank. Behind them, angry shouts and crashing footsteps grew fainter. Caraway's men wouldn't risk following too far from the compound. They had too much to hide. Finally, lungs burning, they reached their hidden vehicle. As Thomas drove them to safety, Claire wrapped her arms around her brother's shoulders from the back seat. I'm sorry, she whispered, for pushing you away all these years, for thinking you didn't care enough. Thomas caught her eye in the rear view mirror. I'm sorry too, for not understanding that sometimes doing what's right matters more than doing what's safe. He managed a tired smile. Maybe we're both just stubborn enough to make a difference. Mateo checked Claire's phone. The footage was intact. They had proof of Caraway's illegal operation, the endangered animals, everything. But more importantly, they had each other. We're not finished, Claire said firmly, thinking of the caged leopard, the cub waiting at her clinic. This was never just about evidence. We have to get them out. Thomas nodded, his expression determined. Then we'll find a way, together this time. They drove on through the growing dawn, battered but unbroken. What had started as Claire's solitary mission had forged them into something stronger, a family united by purpose, ready to face whatever came next. Claire's heart pounded as she crouched behind the concrete barrier, the cub's tracking device clutched in her trembling hands. Gunfire had ceased, but Caraway's men maintained their positions, weapons trained on their hiding spots. Last chance, Caraway called out, his voice carrying an edge of frustration. You're trespassing on private property. Come up now, and we can discuss this civilly. Claire met Thomas's eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. She pulled out her phone, quickly typing a message to the federal wildlife authorities. The evidence they'd gathered was already uploading to a secure server. Photos, videos, and GPS coordinates of the illegal exotic animal operation. "The cub," she whispered to Thomas. "It's our only chance." Understanding dawned on his face. The mother leopard's enclosure was closest to the preserve's eastern boundary, where the fencing was less secure. If they could create enough confusion, Claire activated the small speaker she'd brought, playing the recording of the cub's distress calls that she'd captured weeks ago. The effect was immediate. The mother leopard's answering roar shook the night air, and the other captured predators joined. In a cacophony of wild sounds, "Something's wrong," one of Caraway's men shouted, momentarily distracted by the sudden chaos. Using the confusion, Mateo darted from his position to join Claire and Thomas. "The fence controls are in that shed," he whispered, pointing to a small structure near the enclosures. "If we can reach it," Thomas nodded grimly. "Cover me." He sprinted toward the shed while Claire continued playing the cub's cries, drawing the mother leopard to the edge of her cage. The big cat's powerful form paced urgently, responding to what she believed was her lost cub. Suddenly, bright headlights cut through the darkness. A large SUV approached, and Claire's stomach dropped as she recognized Caraway himself behind the wheel. He emerged holding a high-powered rifle, his face twisted with rage. "Enough!" he shouted. "You're destroying everything I've built." But at that moment, Thomas reached the control panel. With a mechanical whir, the enclosure gates began to open one by one. The mother leopard hesitated only briefly before bolting toward freedom and toward the sound of her cub's cries. Claire's phone buzzed. The federal authorities had received everything. Their message was clear. Hold position, units en route. 5 minutes. "Caraway!" Claire stood up slowly, hands raised. "It's over. The evidence is already out there. All of it. The smuggling, the illegal hunts, everything." "You understand nothing," Caraway snarled, raising his rifle. "This is my kingdom, my rules." But nature had other plans. The mother leopard, free from her cage, circled the perimeter where she'd heard her cubs' cries. Claire watched as Caraway's men began to back away, their confidence evaporating in the face of a free predator. Distant sirens wailed, growing closer. Caraway's head snapped toward the sound, his composure cracking. "Stop them," he ordered. His men, but they were already retreating, unwilling to face both law enforcement and loose apex predators. Claire seized the moment. She motioned to Mateo, who carried the cub in a transport cage. Together, they moved toward the preserve's edge, where the mother leopard waited. With gentle hands, they opened the cage. The reunion brought tears to Claire's eyes. The cub bounded out, and its mother's powerful form emerged from the shadows. Their greeting was tender despite their wild nature, soft chuffs and gentle headbutts that spoke of a bond, unbroken by captivity. Red and blue lights flooded the preserve as federal vehicles surrounded the area. Caraway stood frozen, his rifle still raised but his kingdom crumbling around him. The evidence was irrefutable. The open cages, the illegal animals, the documents showing years of smuggling and unlicensed hunting operations. Silas Caraway, a federal agent's voice boomed through a megaphone. "Drop your weapon and put your hands where we can see them. You are under arrest for multiple violations of the Endangered Species Act and federal wildlife trafficking laws." Claire watched as Caraway's shoulders slumped in defeat. The rifle clattered to the ground. An agent swarmed forward to take him into custody. His carefully constructed world of privilege and exploitation collapsed not through violence, but through the simple power of truth. Beside her, Thomas placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You did it, sis," he said softly. "You really did it." Together, they watched as mother and cub disappeared into the forest, their forms melting into the to the darkness, not as trophies or captives, but as free creatures returning to their true nature. The night air filled with the sounds of justice being served, as Caraway was led away in handcuffs, his empire of cruelty finally exposed to the light. The days following Caraway's arrest brought a whirlwind of activity to Claire's small corner of Montana. Federal agents swarmed the preserve, documenting every cage, every piece of equipment, and every trace of the illegal operation. Claire worked alongside wildlife officials, helping to evaluate and care for the rescued animals as they awaited transport to sanctuaries and rehabilitation centers. Standing in what remained of her fire-damaged clinic, Claire watched as veterinary teams prepared the mother leopard and her cub for their journey. The pair would be relocated to a wildlife sanctuary in Africa, where they could live in protected freedom. The sight of them together, the cub now strong and playful, the mother watchful but calm, filled her heart with a profound sense of rightness. "Never thought I'd see the day," Thomas said, joining her at the window. He'd taken time off from his deputy duties to help with the cleanup efforts. Caraway always seemed untouchable. Claire turned to her brother, seeing not the cautious lawman who'd kept his distance, but the ally who'd stood beside her when it mattered most. "We couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "Your help made all the difference." Thomas shuffled his feet, a gesture that reminded Claire of when they were kids. "I should have believed in you sooner," he admitted. "All those years. I worried about keeping the peace, following protocol, but you were right. Sometimes you have to stand up, no matter the cost." Mateo appeared in the doorway, carrying boxes of medical supplies donated by neighboring clinics. "The feds just finished their final sweep of Caraway's office," he reported. "Found records going back 15 years. Illegal imports, arranged hunts, bribes paid to look the other way. His whole network is falling apart. Claire nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The evidence they'd gathered had exposed not just Caraway's local operation, but an entire underground trade in exotic animals. Already, investigations were spreading to other preserves and private collections across the country. "What happens now?" Thomas asked, helping Mateo sort through the supplies. Claire walked to her desk, where a stack of letters had accumulated, offers of support from wildlife organizations, veterinary colleges, and conservation groups who'd heard about her stand against Caraway. "Now we rebuild," she said firmly. "But bigger this time, better." She shared her vision with them, expanding the clinic into a proper wildlife sanctuary, one that would work with law enforcement to rescue animals from illegal trafficking. Already, several of Caraway's former employees had come forward, offering testimony in exchange for leniency. Their information would help prevent other operations from filling the void left by his arrest. "You know it won't be easy," Mateo cautioned, though his eyes shone with enthusiasm. "There will always be people like Caraway, thinking they can buy and sell whatever they want." "That's exactly why we have to try," Claire replied. She picked up a framed photo from her desk, one they'd taken of the leopard cub during those first desperate days of care. "Every animal saved is worth the fight." Thomas stepped forward, placing a hand on his sister's shoulder. "Whatever you need, I'm here," he promised. "No more staying on the sidelines. We're family. We face things together." Claire covered his hand with her own, feeling the years of distance between them dissolve. Their relationship had been tested by different views of justice and duty, but through this crucible, they'd found common ground. More than that, they'd rediscovered their trust in each other. Outside, the transport vehicles were preparing to depart. Claire, Thomas, and Mateo walked out to say their final goodbyes to the leopards. The cub, no longer starving and afraid, pressed against the carrier mesh, letting out a soft chuff of recognition. Its mother watched them with alert but peaceful eyes, as if understanding these humans meant no harm. "Safe journey," Claire whispered, touching the carrier gently. She felt tears in her eyes, but didn't try to hide them. These animals had changed everything, not just by exposing Caraway's crimes, but by awakening something in her that had nearly been lost thought. As the vehicles pulled away, Mateo handed Claire a cup of coffee. "You know," he said with a grin, "I always knew working for you would be interesting, but I didn't expect international smuggling rings and midnight rescue missions." Claire laughed, the sound carrying freely across the morning air. "Still want to stick around?" "Try and stop me," he replied firmly. "Someone's got to keep you from taking on corrupt millionaires single-handedly." "Not single-handedly," Thomas corrected. "That's what family's for." Claire looked between them, her loyal assistant who'd never wavered, and her brother who'd found his way back to her side. The morning sun touched the mountains, painting the landscape in shades of promise. She felt strong, renewed, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. This victory wasn't just about bringing down Caraway or saving 2 leopards. It was about rediscovering her own strength, about knowing that principles could prevail against power when people stood together. The work would go on. There would always be animals needing protection, always those who saw living creatures as commodities to be bought and sold. But now Claire knew, deep in her soul, that she was ready for that fight. With her family beside her purpose clear, she would continue to stand as a guardian for those who couldn't defend themselves. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.